thank you all for joining us today for Aspen's Clean Energy and Conservation Conversation. I'm Nia. I am the Communications and Outreach Manager for ELP. I am going to start off with a nice little bio about Aspen and then pass it on over to get things started. So, Aspen comes from the maroon communities around Les Cayes in southern Haiti. Growing up between Virginia and the Caribbean, firsthand experience with environmental degradation inspired his interest and relationship between people and the environment. Aspen earned a BA in anthropology from George Mason University with minors in Latin American and sustainability studies. His work has focused on coastal resource management, biodiversity, and community resilience through an interdisciplinary lens. He has conducted community engaged fisheries research in Puerto Rico with the Nature Conservancy, supported conservation initiatives with Oceana, and is currently contributes to community-driven conservation efforts through Ocean Conservancy. Aspen is passionate about strengthening ecological and community resilience in coastal Caribbean communities and advancing the integration of traditional ecological knowledge into conservation practice. Outside of work, he enjoys hiking, swimming, surfing, martial arts, storytelling, cooking, and spending time with family. Please join me in welcoming Aspen as he reflects on his time with the Ray Fellowship Program as Ocean Conservancy's Science and Knowledge Fellow. All right,
Thanks
take
for
it
the
away.
warm welcome. Okay. Um, so I'll go ahead and share my, right. Just 1 second. Okay. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes, looks good.
Thank you. Okay, so thanks, Nia, for the warm welcome and that honestly great bio. I feel bad because I'm about to rehash a lot of that and explain it, but thanks again, everybody, for coming to my clean energy conservation conversation. I know that some people will probably be watching this in the recording, so just to say again, it's okay. It's the summer. I know people are traveling. So thank you to everyone who could be here, and thanks to everyone who's watching this later. But for my clean energy conversation and well, clean energy and conservation conversation, I honestly wanted it to be kind of just more of a reflection and sit down for a little peek behind the curtain in the Ray Fellowship. We've gotten a couple different tasks and different, I guess, assignments for the sake of reflection through our personal leadership plans and through these presentations. So going through some of that, speaking over a lot of these different topics with my internal mentor, James, and also my OC mentor, Henry really have given me a lot of different things to reflect on. So I kind of wanted to share those reflections and have a conversation with you guys today. So before all of that, just to rehash a little bit also, my name's Aspen Bataille. I come from the maroon communities around Haiti, Quisqueya. I'm the current Science and Knowledge Ray Fellow here at Ocean Conservancy, and I am an interdisciplinary scientist with a background specifically in anthropology, ecological anthropology. So today, just to give you a quick overview of what we're going to be talking about before convos start, my, of course, reintroduction, going over a bit of my day-to-day, some of the big projects I did and site visits and travel I was able to enjoy while I was here, and then some reflections and conclusions, more brief. But I can't really start talking about myself properly without talking about my own community. So we go by a lot of different names, some colonially put, some creatively put together by the community, even through reclamation efforts. But my community in the Caribbean, largely based on the fact that we come from many different nations, a one word that you could use to describe all of us is Luku Kairi, meaning island people, literally in a translation. So there are a number of different Afro-Indigenous and contemporary Indigenous communities that still do exist around the islands that do practice a lot of traditional practices, like the family that I come from. So that's really with the sake of or for the sake of recognition and all the recognition that's been garnered over the years, I wanted to mention just a couple of them. The Akampong, Moortown, and Cockpit Country Maroons in Jamaica, the Garifuna people who are spread out through most of Central America at this point, but originally are from St. Vincent, and the Kalinago people of Dominica, which these three of which are the only ones who are recognized by their local governments, let alone the UN or other international entities. So, in that, like I mentioned, I grew up with a sort of privilege in having a connection to nature early on through a lot of the different things that my families would practice, the foods we would eat. My mother has a habit of kind of making it a point to plant a garden effectively everywhere she goes, which has kind of always been how we are, even when we were in the colder parts of this country. So, this is just a couple pictures of some of the different medicinal fruits and general like vegetables and things that we have. All these are photos that either like I got from a friend or just myself. Here on the top, you have noni fruit, a quick view over some of the cliffs by where one of my relatives lives in Dominica now. Some papayas and a pineapple that my mom bought, but the papayas she grew, which are pretty huge in size comparison. Guanabana, which is sour sop, pretty great if you ever had the drink, but don't really get to try it that much anymore. And our coconut pile down here, because last year we had a crazy harvest. I wish it would be normal to be able to send those out around the country, but unfortunately, there are too many things for me to ship it here. And then lastly, speaking to some of the work that I've been able to accomplish over the last couple of years and our most traditional bread called yuca, literally made out of the same cassava that you can buy at the store, but shredded and fried to the point that it kind of resembles a sort of tropical fry bread, I guess. But yeah, so going more into my own specific origins, I had the privilege of growing up around three different coastal cities around the United States. Like Nia mentioned, I quite literally ended up walking around the swampy and concrete shores of three different areas, starting in New York, where I'm originally from, going down to Florida to visit family pretty frequently, and being in Virginia at a pretty frequent rate as well. My family settled here around when I was in middle school. So, being from New York originally, it was a big adjustment, different communities, different things. So I honestly started, I think, in my love of nature that I kind of was a bit resistant to at an early age. I focused more on a lot of my own personal inspirations. People like Anacona, one of the folk leaders of my island originally, animators and creators who work tirelessly to work perspectives that they find extremely important into their work, like Dwayne McDuffie, who passed away back in 2018 or 2011 rather. Some of my favorite animators whose work has inspired me to try to bring more fun into the things that I've been trying to do since I was before in college and in college. Steve Irwin, numerous different people, of course, and of course, growing up in the 2010s, you end up, as long as you're self-aware or have your, I guess, internet access, you end up seeing a lot of events that have really never really let us rest. Um, Things that effectively have been wake-up calls for children because unfortunately most adults haven't been able to talk about them. For me, those big three were oh, oops. For me, those big three were the Panama Papers dropping, a huge coal ash problem happening over here in the Northern Virginia area where I'm based, and the standing access pipeline issue, which I had no personal understanding of within any type of context of the US before things started going crazy. So in like being around New York at an early age, seeing and hearing a lot of those issues, being in around DC and hearing a lot of these issues and seeing them firsthand as a child, and of course knowing a little bit way too much about Florida, especially now that my family's resettled there, it really gave me a complete understanding of well, a lot of environment, not a complete understanding of all environmental issues, obviously, but an understanding of the environmental issues that impacted my family, local communities, people that I connected with on my day-to-day life when I would travel between these places and just live. And in recognizing that, I knew there was work I wanted to do. I just wasn't exactly sure how I wanted that to manifest in my life. So, in going to university, I spent most of the time trying to figure it out. I originally came in as a creative writing major and ended up switching over almost entirely to anthropology in the first couple weeks. Um, I loved the program that was offered, but with all the requirements being a very large portfolio that required me to effectively write a novel before even getting into the program, I wanted to prioritize my own exploration a little bit more. So I found anthropology in one of my first classes, and I realized it kind of let me connect with everything that I ever really wanted. I got a lot of exploration through that because anthropology has its four fields. So in that, you've got sure the communication and social connection between people. Anthropology itself being I guess, the research of people at large. You have to look at a lot of the social aspects, some of the biological aspects, what we've left behind, and of course, how we talk about ourselves now. And in that, I explored roughly everything, focusing on a lot of the cultural aspects, shifting over to biological aspects when it came to how environments impacted people, how people themselves impacted their environments, how animal and human relationships really end up shaping what can persist, how that's even connected to resources and the resource drain being lessened in certain areas. So all these topics were pretty interesting to me, but of course I had to do my general college exploration. At this point, I wasn't even really thinking about the environment as fully. The environment was more of an escape for me rather than a place that I could try to find a career in. The idea of something that I like being a person who goes outside when I get overly frustrated to go on a walk. I didn't want to see something outside, know too much about it, and then to literally just be upset and stress myself out even more. Um, yes, that rationale changed a little bit, but through that exploration, I got to do a number of things. My freshman year, I ended up working on I guess, archaeological dig site with the Alexandria Archaeology Museum. A number of the different shorelines from New England all the way down to the mid Atlantic in the United States had a lot of shoreline extensions happen throughout the years, done with a number of different debris, such as entire ships. So, through the excavation and through some of the, let's say, infrastructural issues that are starting to alleviate, or not alleviate, but I guess reveal a lot of these long sought and long developed problems. I had the privilege to be able to help out with the dig, sift through a number of their different information, and even work through redoing one of their exhibits, the prehistory exhibit, of course. During that, I ended up doing a lot of different things in college for my first 2 to 3 years. Organizing a number of cleanups with different organizations and helping out with just general education, going on a lot of hikes, which you can see by these two pictures from the Rockies, and of course, going on trips with friends, always with a phone in hand because I like taking pictures of nature, never me. So, also apologies. You're not going to see that much of me past this slide. I even at some point ended up participating in an international dance competition, and I think we got crowd choice or something about that. I have to double check what exactly we won, but it was a great time. It honestly helped me explore a number of things, and I would say probably was a great reprieve before the Great Reckoning. So at this point, I wasn't completely sure still what directions I wanted to go down. I knew I liked cultures and communities and looking at the ways that people connect with each other. I knew I liked some of the biological aspect, but I think a part of me wanted some sort of importance or extreme level of thinking that I'm doing something groundbreaking. So I initially was going to go into forensic science at that point, looking at forensic data to see how people die and how environmental factors really do affect that, specifically in looking at the gap in the southern border of the United States. But karma had its kiss for me. I am going to be honest, this reaction right here was my first feeling after I heard about COVID and the fact that my spring break would not be going back to university. My first feeling was thank God. I had a REU application already out and recently accepted to that forensic science program that I just mentioned, the undocumented migration project that used to be run out of UCLA. I do not believe it's currently active anymore, but being that I kind of wasn't sure about these directions and I felt as though these two programs, including the Lambayeque Biohistory Project, which was more about paleopathography and archaeology, um, I wasn't sure about these programs in the first place. So by the fact that this happened and gave me extra time to one, have these programs canceled and keep me around here so that I wouldn't step over into another field entirely. But two, like give me more time to stay grounded and just enjoy the area around me. I found myself hiking, found myself thinking, emailed professors to talk about how the pandemic has been affecting me and mentioning that a number of my programs have gotten completely shut down. And that's when I got reached out to by my professor, Courtney Hughes Rinker, and who asked me to help out as one of her student assistants. That ended up culminating in me doing my first publication ever in talking about the kin contract. COVID. It's titled COVID-19 and the Kin Contract: Navigating Family in the State During the Pandemic. And roughly my part and one of the larger summaries of it was the fact that a number of communities legitimately did not have a choice in the activities that they had to do while the pandemic was going on. People had to work. Disproportionately, certain communities are frontline workers. So, where does that leave people in the recognition for how communities are kind of left to do their things? What precautions are they taking, and how have they been speaking about themselves when they've been so vilified by the communities and by, well, the public on everything that they've been doing and being blamed for essentially spreading the pandemic. So at that point, it was kind of a sure thing for me. I'd switched over by my junior year, looking more into environmental science. I ended up picking up a sustainability studies track and sticking with Latin American studies so I could look at kind of Caribbean and tropical geography and ecological processes going on in the region. And I had my biocultural studies, which essentially turned me into a applied anthropologist, a person who tries to apply their anthropological studies and different principles of connectivity to the work that they do. But after this point, with the pandemic causing a whole bunch of things, me slightly shifting my interest and wanting to go in the directions of a proper career without going straight into grad school, I had a lot of figuring out to do. So in that, I did a lot of post-grad exploration. My first jobs, I would say, at the first or at the same exact time out of my bachelor's, was working with the Thomas Lovejoy Amazon Biodiversity Center. That was technically run through George Mason University and a collaborative school over in Panama. But looking at his biofragmentation research that he was doing, I hope most of you have heard of Thomas Lovejoy by now. If not, I would say that he's considered one of the fathers of, I guess, biological island geography theory and the whole idea that, well, carving up landscapes causes a lot of issues for the genetic ability for animal species to continue. But yeah, so working with his lab and being able to work on more of their science communication aspects on their social media while also doing the marine and community conservation externship with National Geographic and the Nature Conservancy gave me a good understanding of what directions I wanted to go in with environmental science and how I wanted that to manifest as well. But they were experiences that were slightly short lived and not very well delved into. Unfortunately, right after I left the position, he also ended up passing away. So, as a mentor, he did great, but I couldn't ask any further questions. After that point, a couple months later, I ended up applying and getting a job with Oceana as the science and strategy intern. That was a great time. I ended up engaging in a lot of different work that I'm continuing into or through my interests, specifically when it comes to monitoring and evaluation, MPA importance, and community involvement when it comes to resource management strategy development. Um, but after that experience, I completely wasn't sure how I wanted to take things. I knew the scientific aspects. I gained a lot of experience doing ecological research and more like desktop science, but I hadn't been in community in the same capacity. And I wanted to understand how things really manifested through that. So while I was doing some job searching and figuring things out, I ended up doing a lot of community organizing and rapid fire volunteering. This first picture is a photo that I took when I was asked to give a presentation talking about the, I guess, Dry Central American Corridor at my university. A student organization with some older students who remembered me asked if I could come in and talk about what exactly that has to do with any type of migration issues. I guess spoiler, it's a lot. But with that, I got asked to help out with the Virginia Latino Higher Education Network, VALHEN, over at Virginia Tech for a while. Just volunteering and generally helping out with their summer programs 2 years in a row. I attended conferences and got to volunteer, especially through Black and Marine Science, the first BIMS conference being where I got to put together essentially a choral interaction lab for younger students. And of course, putting on community events like I believe this was taken at a charity gala. But moving back into the science and having applied for the Ray Fellowship after bumping into a Ray Fellow at a protest at a time, I didn't know they'd extended it to my year. And I really was grateful for that. So being extremely nervous, turning in my application and moving into trying to figure out what to do in the meantime, I ended up applying for the STEM Seeks program, which I honestly say would might have softcore changed my life. So the STEM Seeks program itself is a student-run program that specifically allows like younger students, usually like during their bachelor's or prior to be able to get any type of oceanographic research experience they'd want through the application. It's completely done by a stipend and run through, I feel so bad for not, I believe Columbia University. But through the program, I was able to go out on the water from San Francisco all the way over to Hawaii, and all the while essentially assess a lot of their equipment, learn about what oceanographers do out on the water, and still try to apply my personal ecological interests to a lot of the research that we were doing since we were given the space to do a personal project. Um, in that, I had an amazing time with a number of different students, all kind of either reassessing or jumping straight into things from an early start. And it made me realize that I do really love the community aspect of a lot of the work that we do, especially when it comes to interacting with students. And luckily, right after I got off the boat, I found out I got into the Ray program. So that kind of leads me to my day to day here. Again, I'm the Science and Knowledge Fellow for Ocean Conservancy, and my day to day has been changing a lot generally. I've been cross cutting, visiting between different groups. I've the entire time roughly worked between Arctic, fisheries, plastic, climate, and conservation in the middle of our Science and Knowledge program. Our Science and Knowledge program, in that same capacity, no longer exists in the same way, but I've continued that same spirit of work, and many of our scientists have completely through our Science and Knowledge Consortium. And in the work that we've been doing and the conversations we've been having, it's been a lot of informational management, keeping up with all the changes that have been happening and making sure that everybody's as aware as possible of all the different programs that are going on different, I guess, going in different directions, program changes, any things of that sort. Through that, especially, I've done a lot of event planning, digital and in person, managing working groups, and at the same time, flexed my socio-ecological research muscles a little bit when it comes to fulfilling a lot of ad hoc requests. In those responsibilities and ad hoc requests, I performed, I guess, essentially all five of these, if not doubling up on a few of them, but going between literature reviews, general socio-ecological research, archive and database dives, event planning and execution, and relationship building and partner support. So, in going over my big projects and what probably some of you guys came to see the, I guess, travel recap, I've gotten to do a number of different things, but the largest five I consider would be right here. My site visits and personal professional development, of course, the knowledge of the Kuskokwim Salmon and People Project, the Indigenous Laws of the Seas program, and my personal tribal constitutional research that I did a couple months back. And on top of that, closing out the People's Places and Not Plastic working group. So first, recapping on my travels, feel free to laugh, feel free to ask questions, feel free to ask me to go back to something later. But I got to travel to, of course, a number of different places thanks to my professional development funds and the support of the RAY program and Ocean Conservancy being so comfortable with letting me explore in the way that I did. So through that, I was able to attend New York Climate Week back in 2024 and ended up meeting one of the, I guess, very high up leaders of energy from the Danish government at that point, who I have never laughed as hard with anyone before. She was an amazing person, and being in that setting that was extremely professional, but at the same time, having those down to earth conversations that you know you need to have really felt amazing to me. Moving over to some research I went on, I believe 2 months later in 2024, about 5 months after I started here, I headed over to Alaska for the first time. I am built for the warmth. I am not built for the cold. I'm surprised I made it through, but I did. I traveled all the way to Bethel, Alaska for the Kuskokwim River Intertribal Fish Commission's workshop that they were putting on. More on that later. Traveled over to Anchorage and met my mentor, Henry, who taught me a number of things and took me hiking. I don't think I've ever been that high up before either. And lastly, afterwards, went over to Fairbanks, which is pictured all the way down here, for the first Indigenous Laws of the Seas meeting. More on that later, of course. And then lastly, ending that year, I ended up going over to San Diego with Tyrese, of course, the other Ray fellow housed under Ocean Conservancy at the time. And we were at the BIMS conference in San Diego, which was an amazing time getting to connect with other Black marine scientists, specifically in the space, also trying to make sense of the different changes that were about to come. But especially having that as a grounding space where we could have very transparent conversations and, of course, get more chances to connect with people and volunteer. It had me feeling great, but I feel like at that certain point, I, much like Squidward down here, felt like I was running away from responsibilities a little bit. But either way, I got to volunteer at the Birch Aquarium. So I felt great at that point a little bit. Try not to think about it too much. Oh, um, I'm not sure if the sound is working, and I'm hoping not. But um, yeah, so with all of my travel for 2025, I'd say that was the bulk of it. I went over to Puerto Rico and St. Thomas for two different conferences, or not St. Yes, St. Thomas for two different conferences, the U.S. Caribbean Extreme Heat Summit and the Caribbean Conservation Community of Practices meeting over in St. Thomas later on. Both extremely important and extremely enjoyable experiences. But otherwise, I wasn't exactly able to completely delve into what my community was doing, with a number of the researchers wanting to focus on a number of different high level things at the time. Getting to hear about community perspectives and how different people have been affected by extreme heat or our different conservation practices and a lot of the environmental issues that have been really affecting the islands did a lot for me. But I got to, of course, do some personal exploration. It's not pictured here, but I got to go to the University of the Virgin Islands to meet with a number of different researchers who also were focused on some of these topics. Saw different amounts of places like the mural I'm showing here and some of the views around St. Thomas. Went on, of course, extra excursions outside of that and met some of the local wildlife, which was extremely enjoyable for me. Um, so in looking at that, afterwards, I took a bit of a DC break and hopped into my next bout of travel and research. Anyway, so we ended up going over to Hawaii for some site visits that I'll elaborate on more deeply afterwards. But our partners, Ina Momona, were extremely gracious in inviting us over to see what they were doing, hold their own cleanup with us, and really just expose us to what exactly our partnership has brought for them, let alone what they've been doing for themselves through their extreme ingenuity. So pictured here is one of their traditional houses, not in their main base, but on Maui. It's a traditional house that they, well, reconstructed specifically for the sake of, well, being close to the shore and being a community center, being like, I guess, a giant staple for the community center that's getting developed in the area, but also as like kind of historical memory for the boats that would be coming and going from those specific structures. We ended up doing one specific visit over to their farm site and visiting their ridge up in Molokai. More on that later, but it was a beautiful experience, of course. And we ended up getting a mini tour from the Maui Ocean Center before giving our own personal talk that we were invited to give there. Getting to learn more from Dustin Craner, sorry, from Dustin specifically about all the specific programs that they were doing with animal rehabilitation and specifically, well, generally what programs they're trying to start going forward with a lot of the ocean acidification issues they're facing over in Hawaii. It was amazing to just get to hear how he connects with community and where he's coming from with being involved in this sort of work, also being non-native Hawaiian. Oh, okay. Sorry about that. Can everybody still see my screen? I hope somebody speaks up.
Yes.
Okay, thanks, Andrew. And of course, traveling around with my supervisor and Angel, who went over to Hawaii with me, made it an extremely enjoyable and educational experience, of course. Coming back to DC was slightly rough, but I ended up finding out more about the Kuskokwim work we've been working on that culminated in a publication we'll have coming out soon. Also, more on that later. And of course, myself dodging the Labubu craze because that was an insane. I added this photo because I had, let's say, an environmental argument with someone who was telling me effectively that mass creation of different dolls was not only good for the environment, but beneficial for teaching people about where things come from. I don't know how that conversation started, but it stuck with me. And so did this picture because it sticks in muscle. Um, but yeah, and in looking at this last year, I got to do a number of different things. A couple pictures got deleted from here, so I do apologize for that. But I went over to most recently St. Helena's Island in South Carolina, visiting the Gullah Geechee community, meeting with Queen Quet and speaking on, well, their traditional lands and what specific things have been going on there when it comes to oystering, different interests that they have when it comes to learning about different, let's say, ways to reconnect some of the initiatives that have been going on in the area, since a lot of them have been changing hands in the last couple of years. After that, pretty much I think about a week between, I ended up going up to Juneau, Alaska for the second Indigenous Laws of the Seas meeting. Um, Juneau is a place that, of course, since I'd never been to Alaska before, I'd never been, and hearing a lot about the area, what it had to offer, and honestly, the types of people who lived there really didn't do it the justice. We were welcomed effectively like family, even though I was supposed to be working the event, taken care of and invited everywhere every couple seconds, and legitimately, well, cared for, I would say, in the best way. But I will say that a lot of the running around up until that point did get me a little tired. So I ended up coming back and just spending more time towards the end of things in the last couple of months, just spending more time in DC at some of our local conferences, Upwell, which is an amazing program that's been running, and meeting, of course, a number of different people, reconnecting and strengthening relationships with established friends. And of course, meeting the reason I breathe, one of the most important people that I've ever seen grace this planet. Thank you again, Tyrese, for making sure that this would be height accurate. It's brought me much joy in the last few days. But yeah, so I wanted to take a quick break and just say thank you, since I believe roughly everyone in this call is someone that I've either gotten advice from, connected with extremely recently, or gotten some sort of vote of confidence from. So none of these experiences would have been as formative as they were without you all. So again, thank you so much. Going into some of my larger projects is a bit more of a doozy. So I wanted to stop and ask if anybody had any questions or things they wanted me to clarify on what I've explained before. Of course, we'll have time later, but feel free now. I might have to see a hand raised first.
I was gonna have a question about the Labubus, but you already answered it, so thank you for that.
Okay.
I
All right.
intend on saying much more later on, but just want to already say, yeah, Angel said in the chat, amazing presentation so far. I love seeing all the pictures, and you have such funny memes and Pokemon that it keeps it really engaging. So just want to say all the love in the world. I can't wait to see the rest.
Yeah, appreciate you. Sorry, I appreciate y'all giving me an excuse to take my sip real quick. Um, but yeah, so jumping into more of the, I guess, meat and potatoes of some of the projects that I was working on. One of the first things I mentioned was the Knowledge of the Kuskokwim Salmon and People project. So, in thinking about background on that, the Kuskokwim River is effectively, it's the second largest river that runs through Alaska, and specifically runs through a good amount of the native communities that live in that area. A number of people do almost entirely rely on the sustenance, the spiritual protection, the physical protection, and just what the river itself brings. So, with all the issues that have been happening around Alaska and across the planet when it comes to salmon, their ability to reproduce, their ability to maintain the same size, and so on, we ended up doing a number of, well, workshops. I ended up facilitating or helping to facilitate one of the last ones. where we ended up recording knowledge from different knowledge holders around the Kuskokwim from different tribes. That's manifested in a number of different products that I will talk about in a little bit. But the experience itself, being able to sit with a number of different communities and community elders that are there, really focused and really excited to speak on their own specific histories. For the context of it, when a number of Native communities, most people, I would hope many know, but most people aren't career environmentalists. They're environmentalists out of necessity. They're people who, well, don't have much of a choice but to pay attention to the waters that rise, because the waters that rise come up to your doorstep, or the food that you eat literally just disappears. So when it comes to a lot of these projects, people do have, of course, their own interest in getting involved, but not always the ability to do that. So in that, the Kuskokwim Intertribal Fish Commission was founded before our partnership, and that Fish Commission specifically is looking into the interests of the specific tribes that live all around the Kuskokwim, all of the tribes that rely on the river that have contacted them and are willing to be working on this project. We've recorded a number of the different natural indicators that essentially our knowledge holders were discussing when it came to how certain things are going. For example, a research post that came out, I believe, in late 2015 spoke on salmon sizes being strangely reduced, even though the population had stayed stagnant. While, yes, there were reportings of the stagnation of the population size, but the size on average that all the salmon were reaching of this specific species were essentially child size. They no longer, for the most part, could reach their full adult size, even though they'd reached full adult stages. And that was something that our knowledge holders, well, had been noting for years before this paper even came out. So with a number of things like that that exist, that's why I find a lot of these projects really important. But of course, well, this isn't my community and this isn't my space to completely try to overly delve into it. So if you'd like to hear more about it, our team, in collaboration with the Kuskokwim Intertribal Fish Commission, has already done a webinar already posted. So if you'd like to if you'd like to take a picture of this link right here, the QR code that goes over to that webinar, please feel free. And my explanation, of course, really doesn't completely do the project justice. So if you'd like to visit the Kuskokwim Intertribal Fish Commission's blog post specifically about this project, just to get a couple notes on it, you can also find that link right here. In the next big project, also that happened roughly at the same time when I was up there, the Indigenous Laws of the Seas has been effectively one of my favorites that I've been working on while I've been here. To give a bit of background on it, of course, I mentioned the different issues that the Kuskokwim communities are facing, but communities across essentially the entirety of the Pacific, I'm realizing, and a number of them have already realized, will face a lot of very similar issues brought on by the same processes, and have a lot of resonating principles that are shared between them that really used to govern how waters were taken care of, used to guide management before management needed to be on pen and paper. It guided interaction and a number of different things. So in looking at that, Wavakirak, the president of, or the vice president of Arctic Conservation right now, well, really simply asked a question and had started a conversation with her own personal sisterhood. What would an Indigenous Law of the Seas look like? So in delving through that, I've done and supported a number of different, well, amazing work through the Indigenous Laws of the Seas portfolio. The first the first presentation and workshop that we held back in 2024, the most recent one that we held this year over in Juneau, I helped with essentially a lot of the, well, logistical planning for a number of them, with the communities themselves knowing their own specific traditions and knowing how to connect with themselves. A lot of that specific aspect of the work I wasn't invited to engage in, and I was happy about, because I'm not from that community. I wouldn't be able to speak on their perspectives, but being welcomed in the space to help them put on this work, or to put on this workshop, and of course to even offer my perspective later as a collaborator and somebody from a traditional community from elsewhere, well, it meant the world to me. This is a GRIST article that came out back in 2025, where a number of people can really read more on what she's had to say on this program, and of course, contact the Ginga and Ignan women who have been putting on this work and collaborating with Wadakidak. But of course, if you have any questions about this work, please let me know. For the next larger work that I was doing, this was more behind the scenes, but also supporting the same organization. I ended up doing a bit of work on tribal government research. So with a number of the different organizations, a number of the different federally recognized tribes that exist across the contiguous United States, there's been a lot of, well, law exchange and changes. A lot of people have their personal feelings about how a lot of these interactions have gone. But one specific notable one that still has repercussions was the IRA. So the IRA itself is a specific, well, it was a constitutional amendment, I believe, that turned into more tribal codes, but specifically reorganizing a number of tribes for their federal recognition back in 1934, specifically writing their constitutions for the most part for them. A lot of these constitutions lacked any specific note to traditional practices unless they were well fought for, and many of them have been changed in the last couple months, or last couple months, but last couple years. But with that more specifically, no one really knows. One, some constitutions are roughly almost impossible to find. Other constitutions haven't been updated since the 1930s, and other constitutions, well, almost entirely still have extremely colonial language instead of working in, well, any specific perspectives from the communities. And all of those sums are referring to the fact that there are a good amount that have been changing, ones that have almost entirely been rewritten by their communities that they've been held by, and specifically ones that mention the rights of nature, the rights of different resources, how community or speak on the sovereignty that nations really are trying to exert over a number of their personal resources and things like that. So in the matrix that I ended up putting together, I roughly cross-listed, I think it was 300 out of the 500 different constitutions I could find and some of their updates, looking at some of the ones that have been talking more about, well, the rights of nature and so on and so forth. But with that specifically finding a number of different things like the Rappahannock tribe over here in Virginia that recently got one of their rivers to be given essentially legal personhood. But yeah, with that work, I got to get more of an understanding of how different communities and tribal or federally recognized tribes are trying to interact with how the law is being redone, let alone how it's being exerted within different communities ever since the Standing Rock and Dakota Access Pipeline issues. A number of communities have been working towards these, and with the partnerships that we've been having, I've gotten to be able to have a much deeper understanding. This gave me all of the, I guess, legal understanding I think I needed. So I appreciated that. So in the second to last, the People's Places Not Plastic working group that I got to be a part of. To give a bit of background, this is a project that it began before I came here. Under the previous fellow, under the Ocean Justice portfolio, Defina, they specifically put together in a working group between 5 different communities that really combine perspectives looking at oceans and coastlines, climate, and the intersection that they had as people, specifically when it came to marine debris biota in the form of plastic. So they made their own personal publication before I joined on, speaking on their specific, I guess, issues with plastic, what things they shared in common, and what specific work they've been doing to really address the issue disconnectedly, while suggesting the type of work they could do in joint. We had the working group for a while, and it was an amazing time to get to connect with communities from Hawaii, 2 different communities in Alaska, one specific community over here in the Chesapeake, and another down in Florida. But through all these community partners and the work that they were doing, I realized there were a lot more topics they had in common besides marine biota. Looking at, yes, plastics is a large issue, but disenfranchisement, infrastructural issues within the communities that they existed in because of older historical problems like redlining or, well, forced community displacement. All of those things really did play heavier, I would say, in my personal opinion, factors when it came to a lot of the different issues that a lot of people had and the things they said they had in common. So I spent a number of time facilitating this working group, but at the same time, researching just what topics they had in common, what principles they wanted to really try to carry, and what directions they were trying to go in as separate organizations and communities. That culminating in our final goodbye and a really nice send off through a number of the different site visits I was able to engage in while I was still doing this work. And lastly, hopefully the sound is not working. We had during the Hawaii site visit, we ended up getting to go through this entire area. Yeah, so legitimately, sorry, Michaela. Legitimately, with the work that we got to do in Hawaii, I wanted to go there with one specific goal in mind, and to consider, like, that being to consider it a proper heavy site visit. When it comes to the way that funding is done in the marine conservation space, it's, well, extremely various. There's a number of different ways that people get involved. There's different stipulations, of course, when it comes to grant funding. And through our connection to Aina Mamona and our visit to Hawaii, we got to see exactly how the idea of unrestricted funds would manifest in this space, essentially. This area being an entire ridge that's owned by those in Molokai. If there's more interest in this, I will send out a link later, but to speak on it, they practice ridge to reef conservation so specifically to the point that they were actually, with the rainstorms that just came to Hawaii and the extreme flooding that's happened in the last few months, they were almost completely able to mitigate almost all the damage to their area. So in looking at the beginning of this video, going down, we are on the top of the ridge, going all the way down to their fish ponds and their farm. So from what you can see in the red clay area that the video obviously starts out on, all the way down there, that area is all a part of their same ridge to reef conservation project that effectively controls the biochemical processes that flow between these areas. As you know, runoff from the top of a mountain always will affect a reef, and through their specific strategic management and traditional management that they've been continuing for, I believe now this is the second generation of their work on this land. They've been able to roughly try to control a lot of these issues, and on top of that, keep a higher, I guess, a better bird's eye view over some of the processes that could affect their land, since Hawaii isn't exactly the same place that it was when colonization occurred. For example, one of the biggest reasons that they do mitigate the runoff is because of their fish ponds down here and the reefs that exist here. But of course, mangroves used to dot and line this ridge here a long time ago. Most of the islands in Hawaii did, and they no longer do. So with that, the stewardship that is brought in by the communities that are stewarding this land really is integral and important to make sure that things, well, don't get degraded further. So seeing that for, like, on first hand and in first person perspective was an extremely formative experience for me, and something that, when it comes to my communication and the simplicity that they use to explain what they're doing, something that I want to carry forward. But yeah, so some quick reflections. In realizing a number of different things about conservation and the space I've been in for this entire time, speaking specifically, I guess, from a community perspective and thinking more about the non-scientists and those who generally just deal with all the environmental issues that are now occurring. In the ways that we've interacted with them, I've had, I guess, a bit of a reflection on that. I've heard from a number of different places in a number of different contexts, but somewhat referring to the same thing. Short and sweet, people don't like being talked down to. It's a reflection I've heard on polarity, partnership, and positionality from Indigenous partners, community partners, and true allies that I've seen in this space. Secondly, people do genuinely want to understand, which was an extremely poignant answer we got from a Upwell panelist back during the last session in 2026, who specifically was referring to public interest in science stories and solutions. And then lastly, first and foremost, people want to take care of themselves. People crave to enjoy their equitable agency, but they're not going to beg for it. And that was a quote that really hit hard from a close friend who doesn't really even work in this space, but referring to just the ability to balance passion with work, realism with aspirations, and science and policy with deliberate communication, when it seems as though from a lot of outside perspectives, from what I've heard, a lot of people view science communication as someone trying to either lecture them or, well, trying to convince them of something rather than have a conversation. So, with that specifically hitting harder, people really do crave that simplicity. So, why don't we take that lead and talk about what stakeholders specifically have at stake? That sort of simplicity that's worked in with science communication itself being a large space that a number of people, well, they have been trying to navigate, particularly in themselves, but without any joint discussion on what's needed, without any outside perspective on what's needed, without, well, a lot of communications outside of scientists who are focused on, okay, well, I appreciate having this work done. I appreciate that you're interested in hearing it. Let me dumb it down for you. At the end of the day, people do want to genuinely understand, and meeting in the middle with that bipartisanship, with that simplicity. Well, I think that might be the next step. So that's just my larger reflection personally. But of course, I wouldn't really have this time without the people who helped me with my reflections. Like I said earlier, everyone here has had some part in this current leg of the journey that I've had in my life. But I wouldn't be who I am legitimately right now without these three mentors. Um, I know Angel's in here. Angel is still a mentor to me who has given me way too many pep talks at this point, but that would be specifically my supervisor, Michaela, my mentor, Henry, and Wawakidok, who has been an amazing person trying to help me, I guess, stay on or tug the line between being a traditional person and a high level scientist. Um, but yeah, roughly that's everything. I've got a list of some of the different programs from an older work that I've been doing. But I just wanted to say thank you again to everyone for coming and let me know if you had any questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much for presenting today, Aspen. That was very informative. I did see one question in the chat earlier before I open it up to everyone. Michaela asked, it seems like you loved or they loved you in Alaska. Would you move there even though you're warm-blooded?
I'm going to be completely honest. I'm not sure I'm built for that. Uh, um, that's the type of cold that I have never felt. I caught myself praying and calling my mother at least like once a night because this was a little terrifying. I love the way that, in all seriousness, I love the way the communities really are tight knit up there, and the, I guess, way that I was welcomed into everything. But I know personally in the work that's being done that international connection is extremely important. So I think it is still my goal completely to stick around with my own community in the tropics and apply some of these topics to some more tropical ecology. Um, but yeah,
Awesome. And there was an issue with the QR codes that you had
no,
on the screen. So if you can share the links now or with me afterwards, and I'll send it with the recording.
yeah, sure. I'll try to get them now, but
No pressure.
yeah, I'll send them over to you either way.
Okay. Awesome. So we're gonna open it up to anyone in here who has a question. You could put it in the chat or raise your hand. This could be questions, praises, love, anything that you have for Aspen.
Oh,
Well, I would love to jump in and say, firstly, amazing presentation, but also so glad that we could really see you get to reflect on your work and your experience as a fellow. Because I know we live in the same area, but we don't necessarily get all the insight that you got to show today into what you were actually doing and all the hard work that's gone into you being a fellow over the last 2 years. So, yeah, I just wanted to say that first. But also, I wanted to ask you, given the fact that this opportunity and all the amazing experiences you've had traveling have really showed you what the communities on the front lines are facing. Would you ever explore working internationally in conservation? And also, um, in terms of your next steps? Are you looking to stay in conservation? And are you also looking to kind of stay within the same partner relations, tribal relations sphere?
Phenomenal questions. Thank you, Sanal. So first, thank you. I appreciate that sincerely. The well wishes have all been honestly great because I was very nervous before this. But with thought to current directions, some of y'all have not heard, but I did get, I guess, announced as a tidal wave fellow for Black and Marine Science for their, I guess, initiative that's going to be going on. So through them, I will be doing, I guess, another experiential fellowship. Working in marine conservation, specifically still going to different areas, but I've gotten a number of different like mini requests for things. International work, just to like say it is roughly the goal, but doing general support and connecting different things, not staying somewhere and trying to be the new scientist in the swamp or something. That's never really been me. So the idea that I got someone who reached out not too long ago about mini research on cisterns, asking about how a cistern could possibly be set up as a water quality basin for a specific community. So maybe they could try to sell the water. I'll be doing some mini work on that, looking into different things that are options. So I appreciate the question. I'm still keeping things open roughly for my immediate future, but this conservation work is definitely where I'm staying.
Awesome. Any other or anyone else have anything to say or ask?
I know we're over, so I don't want to like take up too much time. And I've said this already, but just like highlighting once again what Sanaa said, fantastic, amazing presentation. As someone like who's already done it and been on the other side, I can resonate with the nerves, but I would never have guessed by how great the presentation was. It was phenomenal. I work with you and I've heard about a lot of these projects, but even hearing you go into even further detail, I was just blown away by how thorough you were in your work, how committed you are to these issues, and just like inspired once again. And yeah, I'm gonna stop myself before I just go on a whole Aspen hype train, but just know that I think, as does everybody else in this call, so highly of you. You are fantastic and amazing. And I'm just so excited that I had the pleasure of getting to know you over these 2 years. So really great work, Aspen.
You don't make me cry. I appreciate you so much.
I love that.
Okay,
You definitely
sorry,
deserve
I want to go. I'm so sorry. I cannot top that. But Aspen, I am so utterly proud of you. I have seen you grow so much over these 2 years. It's been an honor to call you like a mini mentee. I didn't even know that. I love you so much. I cannot wait for future travels, your future successes. Can't wait to celebrate you later. And I'm just so proud of you. And like anything you need, I'm forever here, my Virginia neighbor. And yeah, I'm just so proud of you.
I appreciate you so much.
All right, let's keep the hype train going. Anybody else?
Yeah,
It's
I can
well
go.
deserved. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I knew Aspen from our Oceana days, and like we've kept in touch, and I've always just been admired your tenacity and your like resilience to stay in this space despite everything that has all the mishaps and everything that has happened. You've just been like, this is where I'm supposed to be, this is the work I'm supposed to do, and you have stayed with it. And I'm so proud of you and everything that you have done, not just in the last 2 years, but like all through your college life and your internships and everything, just the experiences that you've acquired, the knowledge that you've acquired, the relationships that you've built. Like the people who are here, the people who will watch this is a testament to how amazing you are and like how widespread your energy can go and how appreciated your energy is. So just like keep it up. You're doing amazing work. I'm so glad that you've had these experiences and yeah, love you lots.
I'm actually gonna make me cry. Okay. Well, we have a meeting. But thank you so much, guys. I appreciate this so much. It was, and also to the people who are seeing this recording later. I have no idea if it's gonna be cut out, but I appreciate you too. If you want to continue the hype train, just text me. You got me.
Amazing. Well, thank you again, Aspen. This is beautiful. I learned so much. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. I can't wait for more people to see it. If there's no other closing words from everyone else, I would like to thank you all for joining us today, and have a great rest of your day.